5 four-wheel drives you can buy in this country today for less than the deposit on a new Chinese ute, and every one of them will still be doing the job long after that new ute's warranty has expired and its resale has collapsed. That's the whole deal, and I'm going to hand you the buying prices, the engine codes, the exact failures to check for, and the one repair on each of them that decides whether you got a bargain or a boat anchor. I've had more of these apart than I care to admit. Sump off, injectors out, head away at the machine shop, and a bucket of parts on the bench that told me more about the vehicle than the seller ever did. So none of this is a list of nice old cars. It's a list of machines with known, documented, priceable weak points, which is the only kind of vehicle you should ever buy cheap. Two things to hold on to while we go. Number two on this list has an engine that can destroy itself through a seal that costs less than a tank of diesel, and it's been doing it in Australian driveways for 20 years. I'll show you the 4-second check that tells you whether the one you're looking at is already on the way out. And number four is the one nobody names in these conversations, partly because the badge on the bonnet belongs to a brand that doesn't exist anymore, and partly because its engine also went into light trucks and boats, which tells you everything about how it was built. Here's what started me down this road. Chinese branded utes were running at roughly 17.6% of the 4x4 ute segment across January and February of 2026, up from around 9% in the first quarter of 2024. BYD, GWM, JAC, LDV, Photon. That's not a fringe anymore. That's the new normal. And the pitch is always the same. More gear, longer warranty, less money. What nobody puts on the window sticker is what happens in year 8. So let me set up the thread that runs through all 5 of these, because it's the only comparison that matters. Every vehicle fails. The question is never whether. The question is what kind of failure it is when it arrives. There's the failure that is a repair, a part you can name, a part a workshop in a town of 3,000 people can get by Thursday, a job with a number on it. And there's the failure that is a write-off, a module, a loom, a sealed assembly, a diagnostic tree that ends with a dealer 400 kilometers away telling you the part is on a boat. That's the whole argument. Not old versus new, not Japan versus China, repairable versus terminal. Because a 15-year-old ute with a known $5,000 weak point is a cheaper vehicle than a 5-year-old one with an unknown $5,000 weak point. And the market prices those two things almost identically. I'll be straight with you about the trade-off before we start, because if I don't say it now, the whole list is dishonest. These old things do not have the safety of a current ute, not close. A 2004 Patrol carries a 3-star ANCAP rating, a 2005 HiLux 4 stars, against 5 stars and autonomous braking standard on the cheap new stuff. If you're putting 3 kids in the back seat every school morning, that's a real cost, and you should weigh it properly. Everything from here assumes you have. Number 1. The Nissan Patrol GU. The Y61, built from 1997 all the way through to the middle of the last decade, and specifically the 4.2-litre TD42 6-cylinder diesel. This engine is the reason the Patrol has the reputation it does. Cast iron block, cast iron head, and a refusal to die. Naturally aspirated at first, then a low-boost turbo version in cab chassis and coil cab utes from early 1999, making a modest 114 kilowatts and 330 newton meters, which mattered less than the fact that it didn't ruin the engine's easy low RPM pull. An intercooler came in 2003, it was renamed TD42 Ti, and torque nudged up to 360. Why does it last? Because there's almost nothing in it to fail in a way you can't fix. Mechanical injection pump, no common rail at 160 megapascals, no diesel particulate filter cooking itself on short trips, fewer electronics than a modern instrument cluster, which is precisely why the old hands still take them into places with no phone reception. Plenty have travelled well past 500,000 kilometres on nothing but regular servicing, and because they carry so few electronic systems, they're diagnosable a long way from anywhere. Now the trap, and it's a big one. In 2000, Nissan brought in the ZE30, a 3-litre 4-cylinder, on paper better in every way, 116 kilowatts, 354 newton meters, and an automatic option. It promised a modern alternative to the old 4.2, and instead it gained a reputation for fuel pump trouble and piston failures. Nissan eventually increased the oil capacity and dropped the oil viscosity rating trying to resolve it. The early ones, roughly 2000 to 2003, Earned a nickname in the workshops that I'll leave to your imagination. Later revisions are better, but they still demand diligent servicing, oil changes on time, EGR maintenance, and someone watching boost and exhaust temperatures. So here's the honest picture on money, and this is one of those places where I have to tell you the sources don't agree. One major classified site's own valuation data puts a 2005 Patrol between roughly $11,500 and $46,000, excluding on-road costs. A different guide has the same year starting nearer $6,050 and topping out around $35,200. I'd take the conservative reading, budget on the higher one, and be pleasantly surprised. Because that spread isn't noise. It's the gap between a rusty ZD30 that's been sitting behind a shed and a straight TD42 with a folder full of receipts. A clean, low-kilometre TD42 turbo diesel can fetch over $50,000. ZD30 cars can be found under $20,000, which is the actual buying strategy on this one. The cheap Patrol is a ZD30R, and it's cheap for a reason you now understand. If you go that way, budget for the preventative work before the first big trip, not after. The other weak spot to know, the cooling system was marginal on these from very early on, even on the naturally aspirated engines, and the 4.2 never much liked very soft beach sand. A Patrol that runs warm in the soft stuff is telling you something and it isn't lying. One last detail I love, because it says more about modern vehicles than 100 reviews. The TD42 didn't die because it wore out. It died because it couldn't be made to comply. The venerable 4.2 had no hope of meeting the 2007 Euro 4 emission standards and simply faded out of the lineup. By the way, whether you drive a Ute, a 4WD, or one of the newer Chinese cars hitting Australian roads, keeping it reliable comes down to what you do before the problems start. That's why I put together the 500,000 kilometre Car Care Bible. It covers 101 habits that can help your vehicle last longer, the warning signs you should never ignore, and how to spot workshop upsells that quietly drain your wallet. To get your copy, just scan the QR code on screen with your phone's camera or use the first pinned comment below. Hold that thought, it comes back, and it's the reason the next vehicle has the problem it has. Number 2. The Toyota HiLux N70, the 2005 to 2015 shape, the CUN 26R, with the 3-litre 1KD FTV D4D diesel. This is the ute everybody in this country recognises, and the older end of the range is genuinely cheap now. Indicative pricing on a 2005 runs from about $4,500 up to $20,400. A 2015 sits between roughly $11,400 and $42,200, depending entirely on which one and how it lived. Bear in mind the newer end of that generation has barely dropped at all. 2016 to 2018 examples still fetch well over $40,000 in good condition. So the dirt cheap play here is deliberately the older, higher kilometre end, which is exactly where the failure lives. Here's the mechanism, and I want you to actually understand it, rather than just fear it, because understanding it is what makes this a bargain instead of a gamble. The injector sits down in the head, and where it meets the combustion chamber, there's a seat, effectively a washer, sealing that furnace off from the rest of the engine. On the early ones, right up until late 2007, that seat was copper. Copper is soft. It's soft on purpose, so it crushes and conforms to the seat, but it also creeps under heat and pressure over years. And when it lets go even slightly, combustion gases start blowing past it and down into the crankcase. Those gases thicken the oil into sludge, the sludge clogs the oil pickup screen in the sump, and oil flow to the engine drops away. And there it is. Not a dramatic failure, a slow one. The oil turns to tar, the tar blocks the little screen on the end of the pickup pipe, the pump starts sucking air, and the engine quietly starves itself. Worst case is seizure. Now the 4-second check, and it's free. Get there before the seller starts it. Cold engine, first start of the day, windows down, stand at the back. White or grey smoke at startup, plus a rattle when it's cold, on a vehicle built before the end of 2007, puts injector seals right at the top of your suspect list. Then open the bonnet, look at the oil level, and ask when it was last changed. A rising oil level, because diesel's getting passed into the sump, is one of the tells. A bore scope down the sump drain hole to look at the pickup is a 20-minute job that has saved people 10 grand. The injectors themselves are a maintenance item, not a scandal. It's not uncommon for 1 kd injectors to fail between 120,000 and 140,000 kilometers, so they can go as early as 75,000 or last 250,000. The preventative recommendation is replacement around every 100,000, with the sump pickup inspected and cleaned at each service. If the vehicle you're looking at has receipts for that work, you are buying a better engine than a low-kilometer one with a blank logbook. There's a second layer to this, and here I have to mark the line between what's documented and what's my own read. The engine went through revisions tied to emission standards, and the workshops that specialize in them trace it precisely. The Euro 3 cars 2005 to about August 2006 ran original injectors with copper seat washers and a fibre-reinforced zone fused into the piston crown. With the Euro 4 revision, water-cooled EGR, lower compression, a reshaped combustion bowl, that reinforced crown zone disappeared. The specialists point at roughly 2007 to 2012 production as the affected window. The Euro 3 engines aren't considered affected. My read, and it is a read rather than a reported fact, is that the emissions rework changed the thermal loading in the bowl enough that the old piston design no longer suited, and the reinforcement went out with the redesign rather than as a deliberate cost cut. I've never seen anyone from Toyota explain it, and I'm not going to invent a motive I can't source. The practical version for you at the auction: a failing injector will burn a hole clean through a piston, and the warning it gives you is drift in the injector feedback values, which a scan tool reads in about a minute. Watch the feedback values, check the pickup screen, never reuse a copper seat, and replace injectors on condition rather than on failure. If it's already let go, one supplier listed a brand new 1 kd FTV long block at $6,750, including GST at the time of riding, before fitting, which is the entire point of this list. A known failure with a published price and a documented warning sign is not a risk. It's a line item. Compare that with a fault nobody has ever written a bulletin about. Number 3 is the one I'd actually buy for a family, and it's the softest riding thing here. The Toyota LandCruiser Prado. 90 series and early 120 series, with the 1KZTE 3-litre turbo diesel. The diesel 90 series landed here in March 2000 with 96 kilowatts and 287 newton meters, intercooled indirect injection, modest numbers, deliberately modest engineering, an old-school mechanical fuel pump and separate injectors, which means when something goes wrong with the fuel system, it's a system a diesel shop in a country town has worked on 1,000 times. Simpler, easier, and cheaper to repair than anything common rail. Its weak point isn't the engine, it's the cooling system and the engine's total lack of tolerance for being cooked. Overheating cracks the cylinder head, and it's most often caused by a failed viscous fan hub, noticed as temperature climbing on hills or in stop-start traffic on a hot day. A cracked head announces itself in a way you can spot in a car park. Small bubbles in the coolant pushing into the overflow bottle, and a loss of power. And when the head goes, the turbo often follows because the heat has nowhere else to go, and the shaft starts moving enough for the blades to touch the housing. So you buy one with your eyes open and treat the cooling system as a purchase cost, not a repair. Radiator, hoses, thermostat, water pump, all is one set, done the week you get it home. Injectors every 150,000 kilometers, and certainly no later than 200,000. Glow plugs every 100,000. And check that oil pickup, because this engine shares the sludge problem with its bigger cousin, and a blocked pickup ends the same way every time. The honest caveat: the 90 series is cheap, and with it comes an aging body, aging mechanicals, and low levels of safety equipment. What you get for the low entry price is a genuinely capable tourer with a simple, well-proven diesel. That's a fair summary, and I'd sign it. You're 3 in, 2 to go, and the 2 I've held back are the ones with the strangest numbers on them. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe. That's the whole ask, and it costs you nothing. Right. Notice what all 3 of those have in common, because it's the pattern and it isn't the badge. Everyone has a single named weak point, a published warning sign, and a repair with a price on it. That's not luck. That's what a mechanical system with a service manual written for humans looks like. The next 2 escalate it. Number 4 has a weak point, so well documented the fix is a shelf item at a parts counter, and number 5 is so simple that its main enemy isn't wear at all. It's the mud you didn't hose off. Number 4, the Holden Rodeo RA and the first generation Isuzu D-Max, with the 4JJ1 TC 3-litre common rail diesel. Short one, because it's a simple story. 3 litres, 4 cylinders, turbocharged between 130 and 140 kilowatts, depending on model year, and it found its way into the vast majority of D-Max utes from 2008 through to 2024, plus the Holden Colorado RC from 2008 to 2012. The reason it's on this list is that the same basic engine family turns up everywhere. Light trucks, the BT50, boat motors, even conversion kits to drop them into patrols. Engines designed for commercial duty cycles don't get a soft life, and they aren't designed for one. The faults are boring and cheap, which is the highest compliment I can pay a drivetrain. A suction control valve that wears and causes stalling, EGR clogging, injector degradation, sensor failures, and DPF issues on the later ones. Limited in number and reasonably cheap to fix when caught early. The badge caveat: on the older Rodeo, watch for weak clutches, short-lived harmonic balances, average brakes, and a lightweight chassis that will crack on one that's spent its life towing hard. Buy the one with the tow bar that's never been used. Number 5 is the cheapest genuine four-wheel drive in Australia, and I've saved the limitation for last. The Suzuki Jimny, the 1998 to 2018 generations, the JB33 and JB43. Everyone smirks at these until they follow one up a hill. The recipe hasn't fundamentally changed since 1970. A very basic body on a separate chassis, live axles front and rear, and part-time four-wheel drive with a 2-speed transfer case. That's it. That's the whole vehicle. Low range, solid axles, and about a ton of curb weight, which is the actual secret. A light vehicle doesn't need much traction, doesn't dig itself in, doesn't break axles, and doesn't need a winch anywhere near as often as the bloke in the $60,000 wagon behind you. On money, the older ones are almost absurd. Third-party valuation data has a 1998 Jimny between about $3,150 for the base JX and $6,120 for the top-spec JLX. Set that against the current model, which lists between $30,490 and $47,490. One outlet put it bluntly: for that era, it's about the cheapest viable off-roader on the market, even allowing for running costs that aren't as low as you'd hope. Now, the limitation I promised, and it disqualifies this thing for about half of you. The 1998 Jimny carries a braked towing capacity of up to 450 kilograms. 450. That's a box trailer with a mower on it. If your weekend involves a caravan or a boat, walk away right now and go back to number 1. The enemy is rust, and it's entirely within your control. It's an issue on old Jimnys that regularly go off-road because mud that hasn't been cleaned off traps moisture against the steel. On the soft tops, add perished seals and clips that snap. Hose the underside after every beach or mud run, and this thing will outlive you. Now, the part I actually wanted to talk about. Somebody has been selling you a word, and the word is tough. In April 2025, the ACCC instituted proceedings in the federal court against Attico Automotive, trading as LDV Automotive Australia, over allegedly misleading representations about the durability and suitability of particular models, alleging those vehicles had a propensity to rust or corrode within 5 years of being manufactured. These are allegations. It's before the court. I don't know how it ends, and neither does anyone else telling you about it. But read what's alleged, because the shape of it is the thing. The advertising ran between April 2019 and November 2024 across the company's website, television, radio, Facebook, and Instagram, and it showed the vehicles where you'd want to take them: on beaches, near water, on unsealed roads, the exact places you were buying it to go. Meanwhile, the regulator alleges the complaints were already stacking up. Between roughly January 2018 and November 2024, LDV is said to have received more than 5,000 consumer complaints about rust or corrosion in its T60 and G10 models, usually through dealerships. And here's the sentence that should stop you cold. Between April 2019 and August 2020, LDV continued to advertise a 10-year anti-corrosion warranty. Sit with that phrase for a second. 10-year anti-corrosion warranty? What do you hear when you read it? You hear a promise that it won't rust. That's what it's engineered to make you hear. But that isn't what an anti-corrosion warranty is anywhere in this industry. And this next bit is my read from years of watching these claims get processed, not a quote from any document. It's a promise about a process, not an outcome. You find rust. You take it in. Somebody assesses whether it came from a stone chip you didn't report, whether the vehicle was serviced where it had to be, whether the corrosion went from the inside out or the outside in. It's a set of conditions with a number bolted to the front, and the number is the only part they put in the ad. And notice what the number is doing. 10 years is longer than most people keep a ute, so the word does its work at the exact moment it costs nothing. The moment you're standing in the showroom deciding. And by the time it would have to pay out, you've moved the vehicle on and it's somebody else's problem. Between 2018 and 2024, over 60,000 T60 and G10 vehicles were sold in Australia, generating more than $1.5 billion in revenue. What actually protects you isn't the word, it's the Australian consumer law, which gives you a guarantee of acceptable quality that no advertisement can shrink and no brochure can bargain away. And the regulator is chasing penalties, declarations, consumer redress and costs on that basis. The company says it spent 18 months trying to resolve the matter with the regulator before proceedings began, and that it will defend the claim. Fair enough. Let the court decide, but you don't need the verdict to take the lesson, and the lesson is this. The marketing word and the warranty document are two different objects, and only one of them is enforceable. Every time you see a big number in front of a warranty, 10 years, 7 years, unlimited kilometres, go and find the actual terms and read what has to be true for it to pay. Whether servicing has to happen, what counts as a defect and what counts as wear, what you have to report and how fast. The number is the advertisement, the conditions are the contract. They're written by different people for different reasons, and the gap between them is where your money goes. And here's what makes me angriest about it, quietly rather than loudly, not the rust, steel rusts. Every one of the 5 vehicles I just described has rust as a listed weakness, and I told you so. It's that the long warranty is sold to you as the reason you don't have to know anything. Buy this instead of that old thing because we've covered you. It replaces judgment with reassurance, and reassurance is free to give and expensive to collect. The bloke buying a 20-year-old Patrol knows he's on his own and behaves accordingly. He checks the coolant, he reads the receipts, he crawls underneath with a torch. He's been made careful. The other bloke has been made comfortable, and comfortable is a much worse state to be in when something goes wrong. You know the sentence now. It won't work on you again. There's something underneath all of this I think about more than I should, and it isn't about brands at all. Every one of these 5 vehicles was built to be understood. Not by an engineer, by you. The manual assumed you'd open the bonnet. The parts assumed you'd replace them individually rather than as a sealed assembly. The failures, whether anyone intended it or not, give you warning. A rattle when cold, a temperature gauge creeping up a hill, a smell, a stain on the driveway. That's a machine talking to its owner in a language it expects the owner to speak. We've quietly agreed to stop speaking it, and the trade looked good on paper. You get a vehicle that needs nothing from you for 100,000 kilometres, and in exchange, you give up the ability to tell when it's lying to you. But the cost of that trade shows up once, right at the end, and by then it isn't a repair. It's a decision about whether to keep the vehicle at all. Learning to read a machine isn't nostalgia. It's a skill, like reading a contract or reading weather. It doesn't stop things breaking. It just means you're never the last person to find out, right? Here's the whole thing back in order so you can use it. Number 1, the Nissan Patrol GU with the 4.2 TD42. The one to want. Mechanical injection, cast iron everything. Capable of 500,000 kilometres with servicing. Budget high because the good ones aren't cheap and the cheap ones are ZD30s. Check cooling performance under load and don't buy a story about it being just the gauge. Number 2, the HiLux N70 with the 1KD FTV. Cold start, stand at the back. White or grey smoke plus a cold rattle on a pre-2008 build means injector seals. Ask for injector receipts. Ask whether the sump pickup has ever been inspected. Assume injectors are due around every 100,000 and price them in. Number 3, the Prado 90 and earlier 120 with the 1K ZTE. Simple indirect injection diesel, repairable anywhere. Bubbles in the coolant or coolant pushing into the overflow means the head, and the head can take the turbo with it. Replace radiator, hoses, thermostat and water pump as one set on day 1 and stop worrying. Number 4, the Rodeo RA and first gen D-Max with the 4JJ1. truck-derived dull faults, cheap parts, suction control valve, EGR, injectors, sensors. Check the chassis around the tow bar mounts and check the clutch. Number 5, the Jimny JB33 and JB43. Cheapest genuine four-wheel drive going. Live axles, low range, a ton of weight, 450 kilos brake towing, so know that before you fall in love. Hose the mud off. That's the maintenance schedule. Now the procedure, because a rule of thumb is advice and a procedure is a tool. Before you buy any of these, work out 3 numbers and write them down. 1, the price the seller wants. 2, the cost of that vehicle's known weak point, done properly, parts and labour, quoted by a real workshop in your town, not a forum guess. For the HiLux, that's seals and injectors. For the Prado, it's the cooling set and a head in the worst case. For the Patrol, it's cooling and preventative work if it's a ZD30. 3, what a comparable one with that work already documented is selling for. Then the arithmetic does the arguing for you. If number 1 plus number 2 is less than number 3, buy it and do the work. You've bought a known vehicle at a discount. If it's more, walk and go and buy the one with the receipts, because somebody else has already paid for your peace of mind. And if the seller won't let you do a cold start or won't produce a service history, treat number 2 as double and run it again. 9 times out of 10, that ends the conversation, which is exactly what it's for. Do that this weekend on whatever's in the classifieds near you, and you'll know within 20 minutes whether it's a bargain or somebody else's mistake looking for a new home. Now, tell me where you're watching from and what it does to these vehicles. I'm genuinely curious about this one. A Prado in Darwin and a Prado in Ballarat are 2 different cars, and the difference isn't the badge. It's the humidity, the salt, the dust, and the water crossings. Coastal blokes will tell you rust is the only thing that matters. Inland, nobody thinks about rust, and everybody thinks about heat and dust in the intake. Somewhere in between, there's a bloke who's done 300,000 on one set of injectors and can't work out what everyone's complaining about. I want all 3, with the town and the kilometres, because that's the data you can't get from a review. And if you own a newer ute and you reckon I've been unfair to it, say so, properly, with what it's actually done and what it's cost you. I read all of them, and the ones telling me I'm wrong get read twice. There's one thing I deliberately didn't pull on today, and it's been nagging at me a while. Every one of these engines has a fuel system that behaves differently depending on where you fill up. And there's a story in what actually comes out of a country Bowser versus a city one, filtration, water content, how long it's been sitting underground. I keep running into it in failures that don't otherwise make sense, and I haven't got to the bottom of it yet. When I do, it'll be here. Subscribe if you want to be around for that one. Until then, check the receipts before you check the paint.